the subject matter that we're going to cover in this first segment is humility. And the reason that we're covering the subject of humility in the class on the renewed mind is because the renewed mind is a process that we all are required to do. It talks about the things that we are to do and the actions that we're to take in order to walk this walk that God has called us to walk. And it doesn't exclude the dire need that is ours for the involvement of God in this process. You're not going to successfully renew your mind on your own ability. You have to have God's help to do that, to control your thoughts, to control your actions and your behavior. You can't do it on your own, and I don't have to spend too much time convincing you of that. You know that to be true. We need God's help. And humility is acknowledging our own inability and God's supernatural ability in our life. And humility is the beginning point of our relationship with God. You have to understand your need for God in your life in order to really invite God into your life. And if you don't think you need God, if you know, a lot of people go through, I don't need religion, I don't want to have anything to do with that, and I don't either, but I do need God in my life. I need help. I can't get through this life on my own. I can't get through this day on my own. I need the help of God. And that's humility, is understanding the proper relationship that you have with God. And that is as a subservient, or being in submission to His will, and having Him to be the one that guides you and leads you. If you do this in your life, if you are humble and you are dependent on God, it's like saying to God, here, help me. If you don't do it, it's like saying to God, I don't need your help, I'm all on my own. And when you open your heart and your arms to God and you allow Him in your life, He can do the supernatural. That's sort of a silly statement to make, right, about the Almighty God. But the reality of it is that God can change your life in a supernatural way. And He can do it over and over and over again if you give Him permission. The big key is having that humble mind of dependency upon God. We're going to look at 4 humble men tonight. And I think that their example will speak louder than my reading verses that tell you to be humble. If we look and see these 4 men and the humility that they manifested in their life. Genesis 22 instead of Samuel 22. We're going to look at Abraham first. Actually, I'll just show it to you up here on the board. Where it says where God spoke to Abraham, He said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on the mountains of which I will tell you. So Abraham rose up early, and in the morning, and he saddled his donkey, and he took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and he split wood for the burnt offering, and he arose, and he went to the place of which God had told him. This land of Moriah is believed to be the exact location is the mount. It's the mountain in Jerusalem, which now has on it a big rock, and today it's called the Dome of the Rock, because there's a big dome over this rock. It's a Muslim mosque, and the rock, they believe, is the rock in which Abraham offered Isaac on that rock. They believe that this is the same place. Whether it is or not, I don't know. But I do know this, that Abraham took his son Isaac, who was he wasn't a kid, he was a man. He took him and he went with him. He didn't tell him necessarily where he was going or what they were doing, other than that they were making a burnt offering sacrifice. And they walked 3 days to get to the location in which God instructed him to go to. So that meant that Abraham had a lot of time to think. He thought this thing through, and he decided when he got to Moriah to take his son, and he left the servants there. He took the wood, he took his son, he put the wood on this altar, on this rock, and then he put his son on top of that rock, and he was going to kill his son, and he was going to set him on fire and offer him as a burnt offering because of what God says here. Now, I'm not really going to get into why this all took place. The point that I want to bring to your attention is that Abraham was willing to obey God and to follow his will, even to the degree of offering his own son up, his only begotten son at that point, his son of promise at that point, the son that was going to carry on his heritage. And God intervened and said to him, "Stop, don't do that. I will provide the offering." Now, we know from Hebrews, and I'd like for you to turn there, from Hebrews chapter 11, some of the reasoning that was in his mind when he made this decision. He had already seen God at work in his life a lot. He had had a relationship with Yahweh to the degree that he explicitly trusted God. He had no doubts about God's integrity, God's motives, and the nature of God. He already had a very long-term relationship with him. It was well over probably 25 years that he had been fellowshipping with God. So when God asked him to do this, he had already concluded, he had already built a trust relationship with God, that God wouldn't ask him to do something that was the wrong thing, an unjust thing, or a wrong thing. So he had a trust factor with God, which helped him to have the humility to be obedient to God. And in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promise was offering up his only begotten son. You can work this particular record, and what you will see is, and the understanding behind this, is that this was a testing, not in a negative way, but in a positive way to help Abraham to do what was necessary for him to have a prolonged, beneficial relationship with God. In the sense that if there was one thing that stood between Abraham and God, it would have been this son, Isaac. If there was one thing that he would have been tempted to elevate above God, it was this boy. And Abraham in this act was saying to God, I lay everything, all that I have, all that I am, I lay it all before you. I want you and you alone. I am going to obey your voice even if it costs me my son. There's a lot of people that don't do that. There's many mothers and many fathers that have drifted away from God because they weren't willing to let go of their children. They allowed their children to have precedence over their relationship with God. Well, Abraham was willing to do that. And the reason that he was willing to do it is because he trusted God. He knew that God was trustworthy, and he was willing to humble himself and do God's will above his own will, which is really the subject matter. Hebrews 11:17, by faith when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. And he who had received a promise was offering up his only begotten son. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. He considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. His reasoning process, we understand it here because it's told to us. His reasoning was, okay, if I kill my son, God will raise him from the dead. That's his thought. So, that kind of trust is held up to us as an example with Abraham. Abraham, in the scriptures later on, is called the father of faith. He's the father of all those who believe. He is the great pinnacle, or he's the great monument of a believer. He's held up to us and says to us, look, be like Abraham. Have the faith of Abraham. Abraham's faith was, God, I absolutely trust you. I am going to do what you tell me to do. And this is an extraordinary thing in the Scriptures. I can't think of another place other than God himself being willing to surrender his son where this was even put before somebody. The things that God asks us to do, are stop doing things that are destroying you. Do the things that are going to bless and edify you. Stop lying and stealing, speak truth, and work, like we looked at last week. The things that God is asking us to trust Him with are not to the degree that Abraham was asked here. But it boils down to the same thing. Do we submit our will to His will? Are we willing to be obedient? Obedience and humility are companions. They're not, you can't separate them. Look at Exodus chapter 3. Another great example of humility is Moses. In Exodus chapter 3, Moses has been living by himself away from the Israelites and in exile from Egypt because of he tried to help the Israelites and they turned on him. And he's out here in Exodus chapter 3, a familiar record to most of us. In verse 6, he said, God, you remember the burning bush, God speaks to him in the bush, from the bush, and he says to him, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters. For I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite and the Jebusite. Now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore, Moses, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Why are you asking me to do this? Who am I that I could do this, that I could go to the Egyptians and I could go to Israel? And he said, certainly, God said to him, certainly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Then Moses said to God, behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they will say to me, well, what's his name? What shall I say to them? I don't even know your name. You want me to go and represent you? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. You know, just a point of clarity, every time I see the word Yahweh, the word Lord, and it's in capital letters, I say Yahweh instead of the word Lord because that's God's proper name. In the English Bible, they decided to translate it Yahweh. You know, Francesca, who's living over here in our guest house, and her brother or sister, they speak French, and they have French Bibles. And in the French Bible, everywhere that word in the English Bible, Lord, is, in their Bible it says Yahweh. It has, because that's God's proper name. So when you read in the French Bible, these almost 7,000 times where the Hebrew word Yahweh was written, in the French they read the word Yahweh. So when I go and teach in the Congo, I don't go through this whole explanation. These people in the Congo, when I teach there, they understand that God, His name is Yahweh. So when I say Yahweh, that's what they're reading in their Bible. It's, I only have to explain it here because it's not written in our Bible. So, God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yahweh, the God, verse 15, of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So I said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusite, and flowing with milk and honey. They will pay heed to what you say, and you, with the elders of Israel, will come to the king of Egypt, and you will say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met us. So now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord. And let's go to chapter 4. And Moses said, what if they don't believe me? Or don't listen to what I have to say? Again, this is a pretty tall order he's telling them to do. You want me to go to Pharaoh and tell him that God sent me? I mean, all right, I got your name, but you want me to tell him that God sent me? I mean, you want me to go to the Israelites and say, follow me, well, I'm going to lead you out of Egypt? What if they don't listen to me? I wouldn't listen to me. What if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. And then Yahweh said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. Then he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground. And it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp it by its tail. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that Yahweh, the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you. And Yahweh furthermore said to him, now put your hand in your bosom. So he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And he said, put your hand into your bosom again. So he put his hand into his bosom again. When he took it out of his bosom, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you or heed the witness of the first sign, that may believe the witness of the last sign. But if they will not believe either of these two signs or heed what you say, then you shall take some water from the Nile, pour it on the dry ground, and that water which you have taken from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Then Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in the past. I mean, I've never been a good speaker. Not now, and never in the past. Got the wrong guy. Nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And Yahweh said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes him mute or deaf, or seeing or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? Now then go, and I, even I, will be with your mouth, and teach you what you will say. But he said, please, Lord, now send the message by whomever you will, but not me. Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You are to speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I, even I, will be with your mouth on his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. And it goes on from there. Moses was a great candidate for this job. You know why? He was humble. He really didn't think he could do it. He really thought that this was impossible. He sang it to us so that we can understand, I do not have the human ability to do what you're asking me to do. You got the wrong guy. God gives him information, he gives him experience, he gives him the miraculous so that he would convince him that that God will equip him to do it. This is humility. This is one of the great examples in the Word of God, in addition to Abraham, is this record of Moses and how he really didn't believe that he could do what God was asking him to do. And that is the great place to be. That's where we all belong. You really can't do the renewed mind. You really need God's help to do it. That's humility. And when you have that posture, you're in a good place. You look at these things that God asks us to do, and you look at the world in which we live, and it's like, whoa, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. And that's a good thing. And if you will go to God with your doubts about yourself, I'm not talking, Moses didn't doubt God. He doubted Moses. I can't speak. You got the wrong guy. You know, I don't have the ability to do this. I can't lead these people. I tried leading these people before. I tried 40 years ago, and that's why I've been in exile for 40 years. I don't want to lead these people. But God showed him that he would be the one that would enable him to do what he did. God was the one that enabled Moses to do everything that he did. God did each of the plagues. All Moses did was say, this is what's going to happen if you don't respond. He didn't respond, the water turned to blood. Did Moses turn the water into blood? No. Did Moses get the frogs to come? No, God did. Did Moses get the lice and the boils and the darkness? No, Moses didn't do any of that. He just told them, and then God did it. We work together with God. We do what he tells us to do, and then he brings to pass the impossible. And the thing I love about Moses is God will help you to have faith. He'll do things for you to build your faith. You got to give him something. You got to go, you got to take some steps. You got to move in his direction. And if you start moving in his direction and he sees that you're serious, he'll start helping you to confirm your faith, to help you to grow, to help you to change. Now, if you don't do anything, well, you got a stalemate. God's not going to go against your free will. But if you will allow him to work with you, I guarantee it, absolutely, positively, he will work with you. He will do the supernatural in your life. He will change the way you think. He will change the way you behave. He will change your life. He will take you from a life of whatever it is undesirable and give you a life that is far superior. I know that. I stake my whole life on that. I am absolutely convinced of that because I've done it in my life. God He allows me to prove him in my own life. By doing the renewed mind process, by trying it, and him bringing to pass the results, so that I have absolute conviction that Almighty God is a supernatural working God in my life. Not to mention I've seen him do it with hundreds of other people. But seeing it in other people's lives is one thing. Seeing it in your own life is another thing. And when you see it in your own life and you experience it, Moses can't, you stick your hand in there and it's leprous, you put it back in, it comes out, it's clean. You can't deny that stuff. There's stuff there that, well, that's what happened to me. I mean, I had a leprous life. I stuck it in, I pulled it out, and it was like, whoa, this is disgusting. And then I put it back in, and God changed that life and, gave me a life. That's humility. It's coming to the place of, and whatever you got to do to get to that place of understanding that you need God, that you cannot do it without God. It's sort of silly. You don't have to live till you're 70 before you figure out that you can't do anything very successfully on your own. You would think that we'd get it before then. I mean, we could just read it and believe it, But the fact of the matter is, what is it that you can do in your life better without God that's beneficial? There's plenty of stuff you can do better without God that's not beneficial. I mean, God's not going to go drinking with you and partying with you. He's not going to go carousing with you. You can do that much better on your own. God would definitely be an interference in that. But in the things that are productive to our life, there's nothing that we can do better without God. So that humble piece is so great. Now look at Numbers, please. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers 12. Numbers 12. I like this one. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. Verse 2, and they said, has Yahweh indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well? And Yahweh heard it. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. He was more humble than any man that was on the face of the earth. That's quite a statement, isn't it? Yeah. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and Miriam, you three come out here to the tent. I want to talk to you guys. So the three of them came out. And the Lord came down, Yahweh came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the doorway of the tent. And he called Aaron and Miriam, you guys come over here. And they had both come forward. And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, Yahweh, shall make myself known to him in a vision. I shall speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth. I don't give him dreams. I talk to him mouth to mouth. Even openly, and not in dark sayings. And behold, the form of Yahweh. And when then were you not, why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant, against Moses? So the anger of Yahweh burned against them, and he departed. And when the cloud had withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, "Oh, my Lord, I beg you, do not account this sin to us, in which we have acted foolishly, in which we have sinned. Oh, do not let her be like one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes from his mother's womb." And Moses cried out to Yahweh, saying, "Oh God, heal her, I pray." And God does heal her in a week's time. It's the irony of this record is pronounced. I mean, it's very evident. Here you got two people that got prideful, Aaron and Miriam. You know, Moses was their brother. You know, he was a family. Actually, he was their kid brother. And you know, their thought was, well, you know, what makes him so hot? You know, why can't we be in charge? And God answered that question, didn't he? God explained it, but the thing that you love about it is you see pride in Aaron and Miriam, and what you see in Moses, that's where it makes this great statement that most of us are familiar with, that Moses was the humblest man in all the earth. It's in that context of these two prideful people trying to usurp themselves over this man, and his attitude was, hey, have at it. I know I can't do this. I know that there's nothing I can do on my own. Everything that I'm able to do is because of God. And they you know, that pride thing. I want to be in charge. I want to be the main dude. I want to have all the attention on me. I'm the significant one. That's what was going on in their head. Well, Miriam got humbled real fast, and so did Aaron, didn't he? Aaron turned around and said to the one they wanted to usurp, to the guy they thought they were better than, "Moses, can you pray for her?" Yeah, because he was the humble one. Humility is really the key ingredient in order to walk with God. If you don't have that, you don't have God. In Deuteronomy 8:2 and 16, it talks about the children of Israel and the manna that they received in the wilderness. The manna provided food for them on a daily basis. You're familiar with that. Every day they woke up and there was food there for them. The reason that God says in this record here in Deuteronomy, I'm not going to read it with you. It's in, this is Deuteronomy or Numbers? It's Deuteronomy 8, verses 2 and 16. But it's in there that God explains to him the reason that he gave him manna. And the reason he did that was so that they would be humbled. So that they would understand that God was their sufficiency. They weren't growing the food. They weren't making their own. They were in a desert. God provided this food for them. And what did that teach them? Well, to one generation, it taught them nothing. They died in the wilderness. To the next generation that was in that wilderness, it taught them that God was their sufficiency. That God would provide for them and take care of them, and that God was their all in all. For one, the ones that weren't meek, God providing for them didn't make a difference. For the ones that were meek, the ones that were humble, it made all the difference, and they ended up going into the promised land. It really is the deciding factor as to whether or not we go into the promised land. You really think you can live this life on your own without God? Well, if you can live this life on your own without God, you can, and you don't. That's as much as you're going to get. But if you come to the place of understanding that you need God, you want to live for God, then He promises to take you into the promised land. He promises to make your life better today and take you into the promised land in the future. Humility. We get too caught up in ourselves, and sometimes it's subtle, especially in the renewed mind. We think we got to do this, we got to do that, and we do have to do this, and we do have to do that. You do got to get up and read the Bible. You do have to pray. You do have to, stay away from the darkness, and there's things that you have to do. But if you try to do those things on your own without God, it will not work. Remember what we read in Isaiah. They were offering the sacrifices. They were giving those things. And God said, I don't want to, get that stuff away from me. I don't want your religious acts. I want your heart. I want you. I want you to really be dependent on me and really be in love with me. Don't feign it. Don't act religious. God can't stand religious people any more than anybody else can. He doesn't want that. He wants people who are genuinely in love with Him, who genuinely believe and are dependent on Him, that really are convinced of that. And if you're not convinced of that, then your thinking is screwed up. You need to go run into a brick wall. That's what had to happen to me. I had to crash into a brick wall. Go to jail and do the other things I had to do. I had to hit that bottom before I could understand that I couldn't live my life on it. Now, how many brick walls can you hit in life? Well, there's been a few. It's just so much easier to keep your head in the Word, to keep your heart engaged in God in prayer, and have God work with you. God, help me. Help me. Don't let me go about my life without your assistance. I mean, prayer is so fundamental to humility. How can we not pray if we really are dependent on Him? Prayer is, God, I need you. And allowing Him to be involved, talking to Him and telling Him. We have that stupid human thing where we think we can figure it out on our own. Ugh, what a mess we make of things, right? Jeez. Abraham, Moses, these fellows figured it out. Look at this. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up higher and higher. That's why I stand here and not over there. He'll lift us up if we do that. The next one we want to look at is in 1 Samuel chapter 22. It's David. Actually, I'm picking obviously I'm picking the guys that are real hallmarks in the Scripture. In 1 Samuel chapter 22, David he's on the run. He's got King Saul is hunting him. He's trying to kill him. He's chased him he chased him away from his wife and his family, from his job, from his city, from his people. He's now living in the wilderness. He's hiding in caves. He's trying to save his life, and Saul is chasing after him with an army. Thousands of men hunting this guy who did nothing wrong other than love God and love Saul. He was the most loyal subject that Saul had, and yet Saul, who was influenced by evil spirits, considered David to be an enemy, and he tracked him like he was a wild animal. And it so happens that Saul comes into this cave that David and his men are in, big cave, in chapter 22 of Samuel, 1 Samuel 22. So David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and his father's household heard of it, they went down there to him, and everyone was in distress. Verse 3, and David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. I don't see a cave here, do you? I think you maybe got the wrong chapter. Say what? Yeah, but it's just talking about it. It's not. So he goes to this cave. He's hanging out in the cave, him and his men. Saul comes into the cave to relieve himself. He drops his garment down, and David's men say to him, David, go and kill him. It's obvious that Yahweh has delivered your enemy into your hand. Go kill him, and we can stop this. We don't have to run and be in exile all the time. So David goes over, and in the quiet, somehow he goes and he cuts off the hem or part of the garment of the king, and he gets this garment, and then he feels guilty about this. His men wanted him to kill him. He wouldn't let his men do that. He felt guilty that he even cut the hem of the guy's garment. He goes, Saul leaves the cave. He goes down into the valley. David comes out behind him and says to Saul, look, You know, God has delivered you over into my hand this day. He bows down, his face to the ground. And then he comes back up and says to Saul, God has delivered you over into my hands this day, but I would not put my hand against the Lord's anointed. And he shows him the garment. And then, you know, they have this discourse. And, you know, Saul acknowledges, you know, David's righteousness. And Saul goes away. David goes in. But Saul keeps on attacking him. The great thing that you see in this is that David understood. He understood that he was not going to violate God. He said, I will not put my hand against the Lord's anointed. If the Lord wants to destroy this man, then the Lord will have to do it. I will not do it. Now, why did he have that? Where did that come from? It comes from his understanding of the Mosaic law. It comes from what God showed the people of Israel regarding those that were anointed. Those that were anointed as the high priest and those that were anointed as the king. Look at chapter 2 of 1 Samuel. This is the prophecy of Hannah. 1 Samuel chapter 2. I might even have that up here. I do. It's up on the board here. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces out of heaven, shall thunder upon them, and Yahweh shall judge the ends of the earth. He shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. This is before there was ever a king in Israel. David understood that the king of Israel was anointed by God, and God's anointed were not to be touched by anybody. That's David's perspective. David had get the understanding. He had so much love and respect for God that he would not touch. It wasn't the man that he respected. It was the God who anointed the man. The man the man we're talking about, Saul, tried to kill David repeatedly. He threw a lance at him when he was playing a harp for him. He was, making his life miserable. The man Saul was, but he was God's anointed, and he had such respect and reverence for God that he would not speak against the man or do any harm to the man. He said his thing was, if God wants him to be dead, God will have to kill him. That's humility. That's humility. Not taking things into your own hand and doing it. I mean, here, everybody in David's group said, look, the Lord gave him into your hands. Do this. But David's understanding of the Scripture, according to the Word, was much more comprehensive than the understanding that the men were trying to give him. The men were reasoning with their senses. He was reasoning with his understanding of the Word and what was in his heart because of his reverence for Yahweh. That's the temptation we often face, is that we try to figure out things on our own. We try to bring about God's justice on our own. That's why it says in Romans chapter 12, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. We're not to take vengeance on our own. Vengeance is God's business. And David would have none of that, especially against the Lord's anointed. That's humility. How many people are willing to do that? You screw me, I'm going to screw you. You steal from me, you're going to pay for it. You talk bad to me, I'm going to talk bad to you. That's the normal. That's not supposed to be the way it is, because we are humble people and we believe that God's ways are better and higher than our ways. That His way of living life is the right way of living life rather than our going by our feelings. Our feelings, anger is a feeling. Revenge is a feeling. I'm going to make you pay because of what you've done to me. That's a feeling. We suppress our feelings, we embrace the truth, and we do what the Word says. That's humility. And you know what? It works better than your plan. Did it work out for David? Ultimately, I would say so. David is going to rule the tribes of Israel in the kingdom to come. He's going to sit on the throne next to Jesus. Jesus is going to rule the world. David's going to rule Jerusalem. I think it worked out pretty good for the guy. Much better than taking it into his own hands and doing it himself. Remember that when you're tempted to figure it out on your own. When you don't have time to pray, you don't have time to get God's wisdom because you're too busy figuring out your own stuff. Back down, slow down. I mean, I have to fight this. I've got so much I got to do. I don't have time to sit here for an hour and pray. I got to get busy doing. So, the days I have that kind of mentality are days when everything goes wrong. I can't get anybody on the phone. The computer turns on me and becomes my enemy, and so on and so on. And nothing works. The days I give God the appropriate time, and I humbly come before Him. Lord, here's my day. I can't do this. I can't do this without you. Help me. And I pray. Those days are great. And even if they're not, I got God in my heart. I mean, if everything doesn't work out, I got God in my heart. I'm blessed. I went to what do you call that place where you get food? Restaurant today. No, not a restaurant. A different kind of place where you get food. A Subway, right? Subway. The guy who was real heavy and then he ate these things and now he isn't? Subway, yeah. So the guy in front of me, there was 3 people. There was 2 girls, the guy in front of me, then me, and the 2 girls were paying, and me and the other guy had our food already. We were waiting for the girls. Well, the register wasn't working, and the poor young guy behind the thing, he's trying to fix this thing. He knows that everybody's waiting, and the kid's getting all uptight, and he can't get I don't know what he was doing, but it wasn't, and the guy that was between me and the girls, he's over there. I gotta go. He's just really, really uptight. He's just fuming. He's so uptight. So, well, this ain't a hot chicken sandwich anymore. And it wasn't. That's why I didn't bother getting a hot chicken sandwich. I've been to Subway before. Just get the cold, and I have no false expectations. So because he's trying to make the thing happen. He's trying to make. I got to get out of here. And he thinks by being anxious and obnoxious and uptight, it's going to make the kid work faster. And you know what that does? It makes the kid work slower. Right? And that sort of typifies how our lives go. We get all anxious, we get all uptight, and we try to make things happen, and we make a bigger mess of it. I mean, he got all uptight and all upset. I was in the same lines. Actually, I was behind him. I didn't get all uptight and all upset. I paid like 10 seconds after he did. I don't see that he was any better off than I was. You know what I mean? He got all uptight for nothing. It didn't do any good. That's kind of what we do with our lives. We just squeeze it, and we're going to make it happen. And, you got to understand when you got that going on, you ain't got God going on. You got to back up. Cut it out. It's not so much important what you get done. It's how you do what you do in life. This is that humble peace. There's plenty of signs that trigger you in your mind. When you get that uptight feeling, you're doing it yourself. Stop. Slow down. Pray. When you start getting angry, you're doing it yourself. Stop. And that elevator starts, I got an elevator. It starts shaking here. And if I don't do something fast, it goes to the top real fast. And then what comes out is whatever's in that elevator. And you don't want to be there when that happens. I got to get it before when it starts rumbling. I know right then and there, Vince, you're on your own here. You're doing your own thing. Stop. Slow down. And then get God involved and pray. You got to learn the things, this renewed mind walk, you got to learn those things that trigger you to tell you that you're doing it on your own without the help of God. I mean, good gosh, look at this. What a golden example. His arch enemy is given to him. He's got his pants down. I mean, literally. He's going to the bathroom. His pants are down. David's in the cave with 600 men. It could have all been over from a human point of view. But it wasn't the will of God. So David had the ability to restrain. He felt bad that he cut his garment. What kind of heart does this guy have? A heart that was after God's own heart. That's what it says of this man. I think I have that right there. And when he had removed, he raised up unto him, when he removed Saul, David to be the king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. This guy, Saul, died. He eventually died. David was the king for 40 years. 40 years. And he's going to be the king in the kingdom that's coming, along with Jesus, one of the kings. So, it says in 1 Peter, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Look at Philippians, please. Philippians chapter 2. Of course, the greatest example of all of a humble person is the Lord Jesus Christ. Abraham, Moses, David, each of them were great men because they were not men that, they weren't great because of their education, because of their stature or their money or all the other things that make people great in the world. They were great because they were humble. They were dependent on God. And God made them great. You can do anything with God's help. You can do nothing on your own that's of any significance. If God's in it, it will work. And, you know, I think of that a lot. I think about the endeavors that I have in life. If God's in it, it will work. If God isn't in it, what's the difference if it does work? It isn't going to be worth anything. But if God is in it, it's going to work. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. Have this attitude in yourselves, which also was in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped. We talked about this on Sunday. But he emptied himself, taking on him the form of a bond servant, a bond slave, and being made in the likeness of a man, being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Was there anybody more humble than him? Look at Luke 22. He always did God's will because he was always humble. He never tried to do it on his own. The real crucial time in his life when he was really tempted to do it on his own is in Luke 22, verse 39. And he came out and proceeded, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed them there. This is the last night before he's captive. He's in the Mount of Olives. He arrived at the place, and he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down, and he began to pray, and said, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Now the angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him. And being in agony as he was praying very fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood. It doesn't say they became drops of blood. It was like drops of blood, falling from upon the ground. And he rose and he prayed, and he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. Jesus, understanding from the Scriptures what was before him that night, what would be required of him, the suffering and the torture and the humiliation and all that went into those 40 hours of the last 40 hours of his life. Knowing all of that, he didn't want to go through that. It's very obvious he prayed. This is one of the 3 times that he prayed in the garden that night. If this can be done some other way, I'd really like that. But if not, your will be done. Let this cup pass from me, but if not, let your will be done. And he was so intense in his prayer that it was as if he was sweating great drops of blood. That his sweating was so profuse because of the intensity of his heart and in directing himself in prayer to God. And you know what God did? He sent an angel to minister to him, equipping him to go through with what he had to go through. The angel ministered to him and prepared him. And none of us are going to go through that kind of a situation in life. All of us are going to go through this where we're tempted to do our own will above God's will. And what we have to do is the same thing Jesus did. I don't know if we have to do it with as much intensity as he did. Sometimes we do. We have to really put it forth. But when we're tempted, we have to bring it to God like he did. This is the great master. He's the example. What did he do? He brought it to God in prayer. And what did God do? God responded so that he could carry out God's will. And Jesus always carried out God's will. Obviously, this is the most intense time, but in daily living, he carried out God's will. Humility is understanding that God is there to help you. He helped Moses. He certainly helped Moses. He helped Abraham. He provided the offering. He stopped Abraham. He provided. He worked with Abraham. He worked with Moses. He worked with David. And he worked with Jesus. And he'll work with you. If you are humble and you bring it to him and you ask for his assistance. And there's just nothing with him that you can't be victorious in. He can help you to be a conqueror in any situation if you are dependent on him. He's God, and he will work with us. We have to humbly present ourselves to him, especially in the category of the most important thing that we're going to do in our walk with God, which is the renewed mind. If we ask him to help us, God, give me your desires. Give me your passion. Give me, help in resisting this. I want to kill this guy. I really want to pay this guy back. God, help me to change that. I know it's wrong. Change my heart. Turn it into compassion. God answers that kind of stuff. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro on all the earth, looking to answer the prayers of the righteous. His ears are open unto the righteous. And he'll respond to it. And that's what humility is all about. So we're going to have a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back and we'll look at diversity and unity. Mitch is going to give out a little paper I did on humility.